everyone assumes that it'll be, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson that's going to be the next MVP. What if I have another prospect out there and it may not be as crazy as you think? Or maybe it is. I guess you'll decide. So that's what we're gonna get into today. I'm Luke. That's Michael. I finally got the counterintuitive pointing down. This is We Are the Game. It's a fun little thing we do called Grade My Crazy, where I give Michael some ideas. It's like, hey, what if the Cardinals won the Super Bowl? He immediately says it's the craziest idea I've ever heard of. And then we go through this list, and he uses a grading scale, kind of like what we got back in school: A, B, C, D, F. And A is like the most crazy of all things. It's grade A crazy. And then F is that's going to happen. He can only use each score once. So he has to say that something's absolutely nuts, and he has to say that something's relatively likely to happen. Of course, we don't know any of these things are going to happen because my crystal ball broke a couple of weeks ago. But we're going to go through this and have some fun. Here's our list for that. And here is your list. So the new option at MVP I have is maybe it's Baker Mayfield. Last year he had 40 touchdowns and was just a shade under 5,000 yards. He had more turnovers, but keep in mind, he lost Chris Godwin for most of the year, and he lost Mike Evans for like 5 games as well. That was why there was this big thing about he's still at 1,000 yards. So with a more consistent season, maybe a little bit healthier, he's still in that terrible division. Baker Mayfield, MVP. Yeah, I think he's probably got to win like 12 or 13 games, but we'll see. It would be the first time in history, I believe, that we've ever in the same year. We actually almost had it last year, where we get 2,000-yard rushers in the same year. So maybe it's Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley, which is what we were relatively close to last year. But maybe it's someone else. Someone else steps up into the Javonte Williams with the Cowboys somehow has 2,000 yards. Sorry, I'm not trying to get your hopes up, but here we are. Next, I've got something that we've also certainly never had. In fact, I don't think we've got a 20-sack player in quite a while. So 2 players with 20 sacks. Now, they don't have to be on the same team, obviously, just in the league somewhere. That could be really fun to see. I love the resurgence of defense and all that noise. And obviously, I want them both to be on the Cardinals. Next, all 4 teams in the AFC North make the playoffs. And this be the year they push it over the top and all 4 teams make the playoffs. And last but not least, we've had plenty of years with 2,000-yard receivers, but I'm not sure there have been very many years. In fact, there may have only been one that I can think of anyway, where we had 3,000-yard receivers on the same team. And yes, this could be 2 receivers on a tight end if they wanted to be that. But 3,000-yard pass catchers, even if it was a running back that somehow hit the 1,000-yard mark again. So that's the idea here. While you think about that real quick, I want to say a quick thank you to the people who have subscribed so far. It's been really fun to see this thing start to get going. We really want to see how far we can push it and just have some fun with it. So we're trying to get to 100 subscribers by the start of the 2025 NFL season. So we've got a few months to go. We're trying to really push what we can do here. So we'd appreciate a subscribe if you are so inclined. So you've had enough time to think.
Yeah.
Your first grade.
Well, first off, I think this is the most complex list that I think you've put out so far. So this one's not so much of the wordy, but like these are very interesting combinations of things. Okay, let's see. So the most likely to happen. So therefore, the probable F of this. I think the most probable of this is a Baker Mayfield MVP. I do think that they've kind of got their own division locked up in many regards. I would be surprised if they don't make it to the playoffs by winning the division. And then Baker Mayfield, if they stay healthy and their defense improves, I could see them being up there, which I think will help his chances of being the MVP. Let's see. Man, following up with that's tough because you do have things that haven't happened but don't seem like they're as unlikely. 3 1,000-yard receivers on one team, especially if we're adding in tight ends. I see this as being possible, like the next most possible. You've got some of those high-powered offenses, the Lions, the Bucks, there's some other teams that I could really see potentially falling. I'll make that I think the D on this one. So the next most likely. Man, 2,000-yard rushers. Wouldn't that be something in one season? You know, it's fun to watch Saquon. I say it was fun. That's a half truth, really, to say it was fun to see Saquon run rampant through the Cowboys. We'll call it defense. You know, it was more like an open fence or a gated fence. I don't know. It's like it's possible, but it's never happened. So who knows? The 20 sacks. Again, it's one of those where I could see it. Two players with 20 sacks. Yeah, it's just hard. I'm trying to think through, but who are those two players going to be? You know, it's a hard thing to pull off. The 4 AFC North teams in the playoffs. The hard sell for me on that is the Browns, right? Like how have they come around or not? So next most possible, I would say I'll go for the sacks. I'll say that's the next most possible, but I don't think it's very possible. I'll say that the 4 AFC North teams in the playoffs is the B. And then that would make the 2,000-yard rushers an A, because that would be something. But I think the least likely, I think it is the most crazy of all of these things. Mm-hmm. When you were putting these together, how did you look at it? What did you think was the craziest of these?
Pretty similar. I think because, again, we got relatively close to 2K rushers last year with, again, Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley. And those situations are returning. You know, Derrick hasn't shown any real signs of slowing down. You know, there's the number that is his age. That is the indicator that he should eventually slow down. Saquon looks great. What if Christian McCaffrey comes back? And he's never really been that close to 2,000. He's more likely to hit like a 1,500 and 1,000 kind of season. Yeah. But you've got some young guys. This was a really strong running back draft. What if Ashton Jeanty goes off? Or I really like Amari and Hampton with the Chargers, and they run the ball a lot. So you've got some up and comers, but I do think the reason why I think it's unlikely is it's always unlikely for one guy to get 2,000 rushing yards. But we haven't had a 20-sack player very often in a while. Mm-hmm. And teams seem like once they see a guy, it's like, oh, that guy has 14 sacks this season. I think we'll triple him the whole game. So it becomes even harder, let alone having 2 of them in the same season. Now, we have plenty of great defensive players to maybe do something like this. You know, Myles Garrett pops off for 20 after getting paid, or Micah Parsons just goes crazy and is able to stay healthy. Trey Hendrickson gets mad that he didn't get a paycheck and just kills everyone. And so on. Like, so it's kind of close. I probably would have given the A to the 4 AFC North teams, to be completely honest, because of the Browns. I know there are some people with some optimism where they think Shedeur is going to pop off, or their defense will figure things out, or just the consistency of not going back and forth between Deshaun to this guy, to this guy, to this guy, to this guy at quarterback might help them. You know, losing Nick Chubb, you know, their run game is a big part of what they do. So that's their hope, but it is a long shot. I think there are other divisions I would give that to before them. They're not the last division I would say would get all 4 teams in the playoffs, but I do think it's a bit crazy. As for the 3-1K receivers, I believe it has happened before. I want to say that might have been the Greatest Show on Turf, or it might have been the Cardinals. I forget. There was a year I think that they may have had all 3 guys. Houston, I think, has gotten relatively close to challenging with this. You know, they've got he loves to spread the ball around. You know, Tank Dell, Nico Collins, and oh my gosh, I just forgot. They had Noah Brown, I think, for that one year, and they all 3 had a lot of yards, like over 800, I think. So they're a team that I think could do this, and so I think you're right that one's actually possible. And the aforementioned Baker Mayfield, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they added Emeka Egbuka out of Ohio State, who's a pretty out-of-the-box, ready-to-play football guy who gets to come in and play third fiddle. So there's possibilities out there. It's hard to say that Baker Mayfield as the most likely is a thing, but maybe that just speaks to I actually did my job with the others being kind of crazy this time. So Yeah, that was it was fun to look at. Again, I might shift things around ever so slightly, but as a whole, I agree with you. None of this, for the record, I don't think any of this is particularly likely. But that's the whole exercise. So, but yeah,
that's half the excitement. Is if one of these things happen, it would be pretty amazing.
oh
Like
yeah,
that would be a cool thing to track. And like, did any of these unlikely scenarios happen? That'd be pretty awesome.
if I asked you this in a different way, and I was to ask you these 5 things, one of them is going to happen, just one, would you have said it in the same order? That one thing is Baker Mayfield wins, the others won't. Or there one that you think is, if you can only pick one?
I don't know. I've often when you first said it, the 1,000 yard receivers is sitting pretty close. Like to me, it's probably between those two. Yeah, I mean, I cannot think of the other receiver on Detroit, right? But St. Brown and Laporta, I could see the two of them. You know what I mean? Like
Jameson Williams is more the take the top off guy, but I haven't seen him really get, and he tends to get hurt. I just kind of need to see it to believe it with him. Yeah.
But I could still see it working out. Is like I could see. So I don't know. It'd be one of those two. I think I could take my pick on him. But then the rest, I think, like you were saying, is a real fall off. I would probably pick the Baker Mayfield MVP if I was picking.
Okay. Yeah, I think I might too. I mean, if I could only pick one, like preference, I'd love to see a 20 sacks. Two guys with 20 sacks on a season. As long as it's not like a Seahawks player and a Rams player, that would be the one I'd really like to see. So
yeah.
But we'll see. So I
was going to throw the Eagles in there, but go ahead.
Oh God, right? Yeah, when you mentioned Saquon Barkley, I was like, it was kind of fun, and I was like, yeah, like a silver lining to the darkest cloud ever. Exactly. But for you at least, I was kind of, I have the neutrality, so it really didn't bother me. But he wasn't wearing red and with that on the side of his logo, so yeah, don't say that. No, we've already had an Emmitt Smith. His name was Emmitt Smith.
Yeah, it's true.
Granted, he was kind of the GOAT. So anyway, that all being said, this has been fun. This wraps up our Grade McCrazy for this week. We'll next get into Never Tell Me the Odds. A fun one on Tuesday should be coming out, I believe. I may have lost track of the day. But yeah, it should be coming out next Tuesday, and we'll get into that and we'll have some fun. So until then, you all have a great day. Thanks for joining us. See you later.